America's Return to Westworld, a deep dive into Plessy vs. Ferguson, Project 2025, Slavery and the Future of Freedom. The United States has long been a nation grappling with the dualities of freedom and oppression, justice and injustice. From its foundation, this country has witnessed the intersection of power and control, both human and institutional. As we examine the legacies of rulings like Plessy vs. Ferguson, the deeply rooted history of slavery, and the potential implications of political initiatives like Project 2025, we must ask ourselves, is America inching closer to becoming its own version of Westworld, a place where people, much like the hosts in the TV series, are stripped of autonomy and used for the desires of the powerful? Let's embark on a journey through history, connecting the dots between the past, present, and a potentially dystopian future. The historical foundations, Plessy vs. Ferguson and the legalization of segregation. In 1896, the Supreme Court handed down a decision that would shape American society for over half a century, Plessy vs. Ferguson. The ruling enshrined the doctrine of separate but equal, legally allowing racial segregation across all public spaces. Schools, transportation, and public facilities were divided by race, with the underlying assumption that segregation was fair as long as both sides received equal treatment. But equality was an illusion. White Americans enjoyed privilege and access, while black Americans were subjected to second-class citizenship. This case fortified a societal system designed to divide, control, and suppress. Fast forward to the 21st century. Today, critics of Project 2025, an initiative associated with Donald Trump's potential return to the presidency, warn of a new era of regression. Some argue that under its agenda, civil rights protections could be eroded, returning America to an era of heightened division and institutional control. The fear is that Project 2025 could take us back to a time that mirrors the segregationist policies legitimized by Plessy vs. Ferguson, pulling back the progress that has been hard-fought since the civil rights movement. Slavery and the auction block, the origins of exploitation. But to understand how deep these divides run, we must travel further back to the very foundation of America. Slavery, the forced labor of millions of Africans trafficked across the Atlantic, was not just a stain on the nation's moral conscience but a key economic driver. Enslaved Africans were sold at auction blocks, stripped of their humanity, and reduced to mere property. The Founding Fathers, revered for establishing American democracy, were themselves complicit in this brutal system. George Washington, Thomas Jefferson, and others owned slaves, benefiting from their labor while claiming to fight for liberty. In Jefferson's case, the contradiction was especially stark. He likely fathered children with Sally Hemings, an enslaved woman on his estate. This relationship between master and enslaved, forced under conditions of power and coercion, serves as a grim reminder of the blurred lines between exploitation and personal autonomy. The enslaved had no rights, no autonomy, no voice, just as the hosts in Westworld had no choice in their roles as objects for human entertainment. Westworld, a mirror to human exploitation. The sci-fi series Westworld takes place in a futuristic theme park where robots, called hosts, exist solely for the pleasure and use of wealthy guests. The hosts have no knowledge of their true condition, believing their lives and actions are of their own making, when in reality, they are controlled by unseen forces. These hosts are essentially modern-day slaves, living out their lives for the consumption of others, manipulated to believe they have freedom while being trapped in a never-ending cycle of exploitation. One of the central characters, Maeve, becomes aware of her predicament and embarks on a quest to escape and reunite with her daughter. Her journey is not just a fight for freedom but also a fight against the systemic control that has dictated her existence. In her rebellion, we see echoes of slave uprisings throughout history, individuals and groups rising against an oppressive system designed to exploit them. The story of Maeve and the other hosts can be seen as a powerful allegory for the struggles of enslaved Africans in America. Like the hosts, they were dehumanized, commodified, and controlled by a system that saw them as tools for labor rather than individuals with inherent dignity. Maeve's determination to find her daughter mirrors the countless enslaved families torn apart by the auction block, fighting to reunite against all odds. Parallels to America's future, are we heading towards a new Westworld? Now, as we stand on the cusp of 2025, the parallels between Westworld and modern America become increasingly stark. Project 2025, with its potential to roll back civil rights protections and strip away the progress made in the last several decades, echoes the systemic control seen in Westworld. Just as the hosts were trapped in a cycle of exploitation, could it be that America is edging toward a future where the powerful control the fates of the many? We are already witnessing growing divides in wealth, race, and access to resources. Systems of control, whether through mass incarceration, gerrymandering, or economic inequality, have created a class of citizens who, much like the hosts in Westworld, are trapped in cycles of exploitation. The rollback of civil rights, if fully realized, could exacerbate these divides, stripping away autonomy and freedom from those who have fought hard to gain them. The real question is, are we becoming a Westworld in 2025? If we allow institutions to roll back progress, to exploit and control rather than uplift and empower, we risk creating a future that mirrors the dystopian nightmare of Westworld. Like Maeve, like the enslaved, like those who resisted in Plessy versus Ferguson, it becomes imperative to fight for freedom, real freedom, not just the illusion of it. Conclusion: a call to awareness and resistance as we reflect on the past, from the auction blocks of slavery to the segregation legitimized by Plessy versus Ferguson, and look toward the future with Project 2025 looming on the horizon. We must remain vigilant. History shows us that exploitation, control, and division are never far behind when power goes unchecked. Much like the hosts in Westworld, Americans today face a battle for autonomy and freedom. But where Maeve ultimately finds her own path to resistance, we too must ask ourselves, are we ready to challenge the systems that seek to divide and control us? Or will we, like the hosts, remain trapped in a cycle of exploitation, thinking we are free while the powerful pull the strings? The choice is ours. The future, whether it becomes a Westworld or a place of true freedom, is yet to be written.